All right. And then just as an announcement to everybody who has signed in, this meeting is being recorded. And so that everyone's aware, the meetings are also posted on YouTube via the YouTube channel of Save the Southland. And so that everyone's aware, we're calling this Saving the Southland as the Facebook page, and we have Save the Southland for the YouTube page. But what we're referring to impacts the entire state of Illinois. It's just that the southern suburbs will be impacted even greater. So as you're out and you're talking about it, having conversations with people, and they say, does this only apply to the Southland? The answer is no. This applies to the entire state of Illinois. Every single municipality, every county throughout the state would be impacted by such legislation. It's just that the southern suburbs of Chicago are disproportionately impacted by this legislation. So for anybody who's wondering, hey, is this only applicable to the southern suburbs of Chicago? The answer is no. This is applicable for the entire state of Illinois, but the southern suburbs of Chicago are disproportionately impacted, and that's because of the financial component of this. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Trustee Matz, are you available to welcome us on this evening?
Yes, I'm going to say a quick welcome. Thank you, Attorney Reed. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in to our first and third Wednesday of the month call, where you get the real information about what the problem is and the correct solution that's going to help us out of this fix. So thank you all. I'm not going to talk long because I am driving. So thank you for joining us tonight. Attorney Reed, back to you.
Thank you, Trustee Matz, and safe travels to yourself and everybody who's driving. So, my name is Mario Reed, and I'm an attorney with an office here in South Holland, Illinois. I am also a native, grew up in Park Forest, Illinois, in the Chinese House of Park Forest. And these calls are dedicated to the Flat Property Tax Initiative. And I want for everyone to be aware that this initiative is for the entire state of Illinois. It is not solely for the southern suburbs of Illinois. However, it will drastically impact the southern suburbs of Chicago, and that's because of the financial situation that's involved with this process. So I'm going to be sharing my screen because, as mentioned in previous calls, at the beginning of the calls, we're always going to talk about the new information. So for people who have came to previous workshops, rest assured, you're always going to get new information every single week or every single workshop, every first and third Wednesday that we have. We're going to discuss new information. So the first thing that I want everybody to know is the information to sign up for next calls. Every first and third Wednesday of the month, we're right here on Zoom. And that information is here. The meeting ID is 811-3798-0476. And then the passcode is 094691. It does not change. It's that same information each and every first and third Wednesday. The other thing that I want for everyone to know is that we will be participating in an in-person workshop, and that's going to be taking place next Wednesday. It's going to be at Victory Apostolic Church in Matteson, Illinois, 20801 Matteson Avenue in Matteson, Illinois. And that's also going to be at 6:30 p.m. We're going to be doing two different sessions. We'll have one next Wednesday, August 28th, and then we'll have another one on Wednesday, September 11th. These are free and open to the public for all those people who say, I'm interested in coming in person and participating in a session where we can actually have live engagement, all of those different things. We would love to see you out. Please invite friends and neighbors. A lot of people say that their elderly neighbors don't do well on Zoom. Here's the opportunity. We understand it's at nighttime and hopefully they can make it, but here's the details. You can go to the Facebook page, Saving the Southland, and get all of the updates. We also have a YouTube page, which is Save the Southland. So youtube.com. And then once there, just search for the page, Save the Southland. So go right to the top, Save the Southland. And once again, really quickly to reiterate, even though the focus of all of these pages is the Southland, what this legislation will do is change how our public schools are funded throughout the entire state of Illinois. So you can go here, and for anybody who says I can't make it on Wednesdays because I work or I go to church, whatever it is, you can watch the playbacks there, and then they can get answers to a lot of those questions. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And this week, I wanted to focus on what most people do not understand about our current property tax system. Most people think that the problem is the Cook County Assessor's Office, and more specifically, the recent reassessment that happened in 2023 that we're now seeing the second installment bills, which were due August 1st. That's not the case. Yesterday, I was having a conversation with a phenomenal human being, and as a part of that conversation, I was able to walk them through what the process looks like. So Trustee Matz and myself were discussing earlier, and if there was a person who opened up a jewelry shop in Olympia Fields and started to sell jewelry, that person would set the price for their jewelry. So what it is that that person who's selling the jewelry sets the price for their necklace. And let's say they set that price at $100. When they go to sell that jewelry, their sales tax for Olympia Fields, which has to be applied to the sale of that jewelry. The sales tax in Olympia Fields is 10%. When the person who's selling the jewelry sets a sales price of $100 for the necklace, they have nothing to do with Olympia Fields' sales tax. That's what happens with our properties. The Cook County Assessor's Office is like the person who sets the price for the necklace. That person has nothing to do with the sales tax, i.e. the property tax for Olympia Fields. That tax amount is set by the municipality. So for everybody who is thinking the problem is the Cook County Assessor's Office, no. The assessor sets the price and the value, the assessed value of your property, but has nothing to do with the property tax percentage. Does everyone understand that? If not, please go ahead and post your questions or your comments or your thoughts. But just like the person who made the jewelry and then sets the price of $100 for the jewelry, that person has nothing to do with the 10% sales tax that Olympia Fields charges. It's the same way with the Cook County Assessor's Office. The assessor is simply putting a value on property and has nothing to do with the property tax rate. That is set by all of the taxing bodies. The problem is the assessed value is way too much due to flipping properties in our location. Thank you so much for that comment, and I disagree wholeheartedly with you. And the reason why I disagree wholeheartedly with you, and thank you again for the comment, is because I'm a real estate attorney. I represent people who sell properties, not just people who flip properties, but people who sell their properties that they've been in for 30 years. So I recently represented a couple who purchased their property in the 90s in Park Forest, Illinois, and they did not do any rehab to their property. But because of inflation and because of the appreciation that happens with real estate, they sold their property in Park Forest for $230,000. They did not rehab their property. They did not flip it. They lived in it since the 1990s. And now that all of their children have graduated from high school and went on to college and to military and other places, they said, we're now ready to downsize. They listed their property for $250,000. It sold for $230,000. So because of that, that was not a flip property. The market is simply increasing. It's the nature of property. And this is not something which is unique to just our areas. So when you say our locations, this is happening all across the United States of America. You can go and find out what the increase has been. Properties have been increasing drastically. There's another comment. As a next step, have you reached out to media outlets? Thank you for that comment. Most people consistently want to kind of look at the media angle. We've already been on the news. I've been on the news 3 different times related to this topic. You can go to ABC7 and type in property tax apocalypse, and it'll bring up a story that I recently did with Jason Knowles. So to answer your question, yes, we have reached out to media outlets, but the fact that you're asking that question and weren't aware of the different news pieces which have been done suggests that the media outlets aren't the conduit to help us get the word out, because I've personally been on the news numerous times, and unfortunately, people aren't watching the news. Property doesn't appreciate 400 to 500% in 2 years. It's totally unfair to people who are not trying to sell. Again, I understand your frustration, but property does appreciate 400 to 500% in 2 years. And more importantly, remember, our reassessment this most recent time wasn't for 2 years. It was based on 6 years. So the last time that the properties in the southern suburbs of Chicago were reassessed was 2017. So yes, properties did appreciate by 400% over the last 6 years. I understand, it's hard to accept, it's hard to swallow, but that's the facts. But it doesn't matter, because it's not an assessment problem, it's a property tax rate problem. And that all stems from the fact that the state of Illinois is not contributing their fair share towards our public school education. So the next question is, how is the property assessed? So thank you for asking that question. And I'm going to go ahead and answer that one because we have not covered that recently. So how property is assessed is based on market value. So for the person, Lois Jones, would you please put an address that's on your block in the chat group? Because I'll use a property that's on your block so you can see it with the one that's right in your neighborhood. So if Lois Jones, okay, so if a buyer sees a home for $140,000, it's been upgraded, another home same size but never upgraded and appraised for $140, her assessment is for sale for $120 but needs $40,000 upgrades, what will you buy? So that's a great question, Deborah. The property's purchase value and appraised value, all of those aren't specifically what's driving the assessed value. It's based on market comparable sales throughout the whole community. So my guess is the person who sees a home that's been upgraded is going to want to purchase the one that's upgraded. All right, perfect. So we have a house, 118 Wilson Street, and it was bought for $64,000 and sold for $228,000 in 6 months. Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. We're not going to use that property. We're going to use a different property. So we're going to go to cookcountypropertyinfo.com. And this is something that everybody has the capabilities to do. This is what's called the tax portal. And the tax portal is, and give me one moment because I got to let people in it. And I apologize to the people who were waiting. Sorry about that. The chat was hiding the screen. So we're just going to type in 1 Wilson Park Forest. So this is the tax portal, and this is how you can check to see property values throughout your community. All of this information is public record. So we were looking at 118. Let's look at 116 and find out what's going on with 116 Wilson Street. Okay, so we've got 116 Wilson Street, and this is perfect because in looking at this, I see a 2 exemptions, and that tells me that this is a senior right off the bat. Yep, we got a senior citizens exemption. Typically, a senior isn't buying a property within the last 2 or 3 years. They've been there for a while. So when we go and we look at this property, I look here for the documents and deeds and liens, and I don't see a deed recently, which means that this property owner likely purchased this property before 1995 when this mortgage happened. So this is the perfect example of what I was saying about how property has appreciated. So now we have this property in Park Forest, and according to the assessor's office, the estimated property value is $180,000. So now we're going to go to the open market and see what the open market says this property is worth. So all you do is just type in the address right in Google, and it'll bring up a Redfin estimate. So we're going to click on the Redfin estimate and see what it says. Perfect. This is perfect. And again, I didn't know about this property. I literally took it from the person who commented in the group, and now we're doing the actual scenario. So the assessor's office said that this property has an estimated property value of $180,000, and Redfin, the open market, says this property has an estimated value of $176,734. The assessor's spot on. And I know that a lot of people hate to hear that because we're grasping at straws, trying to find something. The problem's not the assessor. Redfin, the open market, says 176. Assessor says 180. So for the person who says, how are these assessed properties being assessed, it's based on what the open market is saying. And in 95% of instances, and I've looked at over 600 properties already, we're being under assessed. So the assessor has actually looked out for us. In this case, this property owner can make the argument that his property is over assessed by $4,000, but I can tell you, even if he wins his appeal, it's not going to drop that bill down. Now, when you look at the tax bill, his tax bill doubled. It went from $4,700 to $8,800. It went up by $4,000. James Strickland is probably going to be struggling to pay this property tax bill. He might be on a fixed income. He might not be. My guess is he's not, because if he was, then he would qualify for the senior freeze. He didn't get the senior freeze exemption, so that tells me that he's probably not on a fixed income. But the problem is this. The tax rate is 24.269%. Hinsdale's tax rate is 6%. So Park Forest pays 4 times the property tax rate of Hinsdale. That's the problem. It has nothing to do with houses being rehabbed and flipped. It has nothing to do with the assessor over assessing properties. It's the fact that Park Forest has a 24% property tax rate and Hinsdale has a 6%. And the reason why that is because the state is not paying their fair share towards our public school education. And how do I know that? Because we can take a look and see what the state is contributing. Park Forest sends their, and at this part of Park Forest, because Park Forest is in Will County and Cook County, but this part of Park Forest sends their children to Rich Township High School. That's my alma mater. I graduated from Rich East, the class of 99, greatest class ever. And that's where it is that Park Forestians are sending their teenagers for high school. Rich Township needed $54 million to be adequate, and that number is based on the Illinois State Board of Education's figure based on the enrollment, and Rich Township got $44 million, despite the fact that Park Forest has the 4th highest property tax rate in all of the United States of America. So let's take a look at where the money came from. When you click on District Environment and go to District Finances, then click on where it says Revenue Percentages, it brings up the information about where the money came from. And in this case, 75% of that money came from the local community, while 17.9% came from the state of Illinois. That's less than what the state averages. This is why the property taxes are so high in Park Forest. It's not because of the Cook County Assessor's Office. It's not because of rehabbers rehabbing properties and flipping them and selling them for high amounts. It's because the state only gave 17.9% to pay for the $54 million budget of Rich Township High School. That's the problem. And we have to get educated about it. And that's what we're striving to change. As long as we keep getting distracted and complaining about the assessor or complaining about rehabbers, we're going to find ourselves in this predicament over and over again. We have to address the root problem. The state of Illinois is not contributing its fair share. They have not done so since the 60s, and this is what has to change. We have to change our knowledge of it, and that's what these workshops are for, the educate and mobilize. So that's what it is. Okay, comps, I get it, but to assume per assessment with comparables and what your home is worth, so homes still have original kitchen with steel cabinets. Will a home appraisal help show that my home is not worth the assessment posted? So for the person who just posted that, send me directly your address and I'll personally take a review and see whether or not it's accurate. Again, our office, I've been doing property tax appeals for the last 11 years. I filed over 2,000. I'm very familiar with that system, and I can tell you that there's a very strong likelihood that your property's assessed value is accurate. I'll take a look. If you want to pay for an appraisal, usually it'll cost you $600, and there's a good chance that that appraised amount's going to come out to be more than you assessed. So now you just spent $600 that you're not going to recoup. Who determines the property tax rate? That's a great question, and that's where we're going to go next. For the person who raised their hand, please, if you can, type in your question in the chat group, and we'll get an answer. How can we get the state to kick in their fair share? I know we need people to move to the next steps. If the people are not showing up, how do we move to the next step? So great question for that person. We don't move to the next step if the people don't show up. I understand that a lot of people, again, do not like, and I'm going to try and mute everyone so we don't get any background noise, but this doesn't change if we don't have enough people. So for everybody who wants to keep trying to find a shortcut or a microwave around it, we have to get the people. Our democratic process was set up to ensure that the people's will was what elected officials had to abide by. That's our democratic process. I understand that a lot of people don't like hearing that because we are living in this albatross of a situation, but we can't change this without the people. As much as that sucks, and trust me, I've been working on this for over a decade. With Trustee Matts, we've been partnering for 5 years. We have to get people. So instead of trying to figure out how we move to the next step without the people, we got to figure out how to get the people, because that's the only solution. We need our state reps and our state senators to support this legislation. The only way our state reps and our state senators are going to support this legislation is that they have to know that if they don't, they're going to be voted out of office. The only way we can vote them out of office is we have to have enough people in their particular districts who are willing to support this initiative, and then at which point we can get this passed. There is no moving to the next step without the people. We already learned that when J.B. Pritzker tried to introduce the Fair Tax Amendment, and then it failed because not enough people supported it. We can't do this without the people. So I understand lots of people don't want to hear that because it sucks that people aren't showing up. That's what our work is. We have to get the people. Each of us has to make a commitment that we're going to get more people. So my email address, I'm going to post it in the chat group, is mario.with.lumarti@outlook.com. But you can also send me a direct message on here, and then I can get that address there. Why is there a separate property tax for garage space and 48-unit condo building in Hazelcrest? Send me those details at the email address, and I'll be more than happy to look into it. Is this meeting in Matteson only for Cook County residents or Will County also? Everybody who's in the state of Illinois is welcome to attend that meeting in Matteson, because remember, this impacts everyone in the state of Illinois. If you live in a poor community anywhere in the state, Rockford, East St. Louis, Kankakee, anywhere that there's not a lot of wealth, your property tax rates on average are twice as much as a wealthy community. Hinsdale's tax rate is 6%. Park Forest's tax rate is 24%. The goal and what the Fair Tax Initiative is that we want for the state to contribute its fair share towards our public school education. And that means that the state would contribute more than 50% to all public school education throughout the state of Illinois. How we accomplish that is by changing the tax rates to 10% throughout the entire state of Illinois. Every single community throughout the state of Illinois will go to a 10% flat property tax rate. And all of the money that is collected for education will then go into one pot. And then the state will pay for all public school funding throughout the entire state of Illinois. So now Hinsdale's tax rate will be 10%. Burr Ridge's tax rate will be 10%. Naperville, 10%. Every single community throughout the state will have a flat tax rate of 10% for property taxes. And all money that's collected for public school education will be used to pay for all public schools throughout the entire state of Illinois. So no longer will it be a case where if you live in Park Forest, the bulk of your property tax dollars goes to pay for the public schools just in Park Forest. Your tax dollars will be used to pay for all schools throughout the state. So, was the vote for the fair tax presented by Pritzker even close? It was. So it ended up being 60% to 40%, which is relatively decent considering that most people had no clue about what it was because there was a lack of education. We cannot afford to replay that same mistake. And that's why we have to first educate and then mobilize. And that's why we need people. The people need to understand what the problem is. It's not the Cook County assessor. It's not rehabbers. It's not seniors. It's not balloon salaries for educators. It's the state not contributing their fair share. Can I explain again why Hinsdale and Naperville is so low? Yes, that I can. So the reason why Hinsdale and Naperville are so low is because right now, the local community is forced to pay 63% of the public school bill for their local communities. So in the case of Ridge Township, for those who remember, the State Board of Education said that Ridge Township High School needs $54 million to pay for their public schools, for our public schools. Well, the median property value in Park Forest so the median household income in Park Forest is a whopping $58,907. And the median property value in Park Forest is a whopping $94,700. Poverty rate is 17%. We're talking about poor people being expected to pay $54 million just for one of the high schools. Park Forest also supports Crete-Monique. So some of their students go to Crete. That's another expense. Well, let's compare that to the median. Oh, so let's take a look and see what the high school expense is for Hinsdale. Hinsdale is HSD 86. And we're going to search to see what their high school budget is. So the Hinsdale Township High School, they have a budget of $57 million. So it's very close to what Ridge Township is. Rich Township was 54 million. Hinsdale is 57 million. And again, that's based on how many students they're educating, based on enrollment. Number of students times per pupil funding numbers, that gives us our adequacy target. They need 57 million. Let's see how wealthy Hinsdaleans are in comparison. Hinsdale, Illinois, median household income is a whopping $250,000. That's essentially 4 times as much as Park Forestians. The median property value, $962,700. That's 10 times as much. So because there's so much wealth in Hinsdale, you only have to take a small little tiny percentage in order to come up with 57 million. And not only did they come up with 57 million, they came up with 85 million. So their property tax rate is 6%, and yet they were able to raise $85 million in property tax revenue to pay for their public high schools. That's 148% to adequacy, whereas Park Forest was at 24%, and we were only able to raise $44 million, which was 82% to adequacy. And again, I want to stress to everyone, these aren't my numbers. All of this information is public record. You go to IllinoisReportCard.com, you go to the census data and get that information. You can go to Redfin and see your estimates. It's just the case where most people aren't familiar with it because of what I do for a living and how long I've studied this. I have a much higher familiarity with it, but it's information that's available. And this is how we get educated. But we need enough people to get educated about it, so then we can mobilize. If we go to the state rep and the state senator and say 40 people showed up to the last call and they're pissed about our current public school funding formula, the state rep's going to say, okay, thanks for letting me know, and keep on doing nothing. Whereas if we've got 4,000 people or 40,000 people, now the state rep and the state senator can no longer deny us, because if they do, we'll just vote in a new state rep and a new state senator. Until we get educated, we can't mobilize because we need numbers. For the southern suburbs, for Rockford, for Kankakee, for Danville, East St. Louis, all of our poor communities, our strength is in numbers. But in order to get numbers, we need education and mobilization. So I'm going to pause here to see, are there any questions? Any questions? And I know we've covered a lot. We have covered a lot. The next thing that I want to share with everyone is a common question that comes up as well. But any questions that anybody has, please go ahead and post them. Okay, so if not, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen once again. So some of the new content that I wanted for people to be aware of is that the Cook County Treasurer's Office publishes the collection rates. So Cook County collection rates for property taxes. This is another resource that most people have never heard about, have never ever seen, but you can check to see what the collection rates are for your community. One of the things that we run into in the southern suburbs is the fact that when you look at a community like Fort Heights, they send out a property tax bill, but only 28% of Fort Heights residents pay their property tax bill. So even though they're supposed to be paying a certain amount, only 28% of those residents pay their property tax bill. You can find out what the collection rates are for any and every community throughout Cook County. So if you go to where it says South Suburbs, Fort Heights' collection rate is 28.55%. Calumet Park is 78%. Harvey is 51%. Dixmoor is 80%. So even though people and businesses are being taxed these outrageous bills, they're just not paying them. And because of the fact that they're not being paid, that causes all the people who are paying their property tax bills to have an increase in their levies, which causes the tax rate to go up. So that's all the more reason why we need for the state to contribute their fair share. Because if you live in Robbins, 1 out of every 2 homes is not even paying their property tax bill. This information is available at the Cook County Treasurer's website. And again, I'm going to go through it again so everyone can see how I got there. Go to Google and type in Cook County collection rates for property taxes. All of this information is public record. It's not my data. It's the data that's available for the public. Most people have never heard of this data though. Go to Cook County collection rates for property taxes, type it into Google, and the first link is collection rates for tax year 2022. Click on that link, and then you can scroll down to the bottom, and there's this interactive map where you can see every community and the collection rates throughout Cook County. When you go to the south suburbs, we have Fort Heights, which is the lowest, at just 28%. And then thereafter, we have a couple 50%ers. Robbins is at 50%. Harvey is at 50%. Phoenix is at 59%. So it's a case where if you are one of the 59% that pay your property tax bills, the other 41% that aren't is causing for your property tax bill to go up. Because when the local municipality doesn't collect everything that they're supposed to, they have to increase it on the people who do pay. All of this data is here. It's available. The state that changed to a flat tax, are we able to meet to find out how they were able to change to flat tax? So the state that changed to a flat tax was Vermont. And by all means, you're welcome to meet with them to see how they changed. But I can tell you how they were able to change to a flat tax rate was because the Vermont State Supreme Court ruled that the state was not contributing its fair share in a lawsuit that was brought. And as a result, the legislature had no choice. Back in the 70s, someone tried to file a lawsuit against the state of Illinois, alleging the same thing, and the appellate court ruled against the petitioner. So that track has already been tried. And trust me, as an attorney, I would love nothing more than to be able to just go file a lawsuit and get the result that I've wanted for the last decade. But it's not something that's probable in the state of Illinois. But you're welcome to go to Vermont and attempt to meet with them and get whatever insight. But I've already done the research, already looked at the case law. So it's not something I'd recommend attempting to try and do. My ask would be, instead of going to Vermont and meeting with them, let's turn our focus to going on your block and meeting with everybody on your block and asking them to join along with this initiative. Let's stop trying to go outside of our local community. If everybody just makes a commitment to go knock on every door on your block, knock on every single door on your block and beg your neighbors to join the call, if we all do that, we'll get the people. We can't keep trying to run away from the fact that we need our fellow neighbors to support this initiative. I know it's hard to fathom that. I know it's hard to accept it. We got to do it. 6% of 900,000 versus 24% of 98,000 made it easier for Hinsdale to reach 57 million. Absolutely. Because remember, just do the math. Our property taxes aren't actually calculated based on the dollar amount. It's based on the equalized assessed value. So it's not as cut and dry as 6% of 900,000 versus 24% of 98,000. But let's just say that it is that cut and dry. And let's do that math. So 900,000, and we're not gonna round down, because I don't know why you said 900,000 for Hinsdale versus 962,000. If we're going to try and figure this out, we have to be intellectually honest. So we're going to use the real number, which is $962,700 times 0.06. That's $57,762. So now let's use, let's get the actual number for Park Forest, because again, I want to be intellectually honest and then use the actual data. 94,007, you round it up for Park Forest, but it's so 94,700 times 0.24 equals 22,278. So what it is that 6% of Hinsdale's number was $57,000. 24% of Park Forest's number of just 94,000, not 98, was only 22,000. So to answer your question, yes, 6% of 962,000 makes it 3 times easier to reach $57 million. It's just math. It's basic math. 6% of a giant number is essentially almost 3 times as much of 24% of a ridiculously small number. And that's our problem. Right now, we're paying for our public schools from our local communities. If you're poor, your school district is going to be poor. If you're wealthy, your school district is going to be wealthy. And that's because the state's only contributing 24%. We need the state to contribute well above 50%, but more importantly, get closer to 90%, which is what Vermont is doing. Yes, we have reached out to the Southland mayors to get support, and it works out the same way that it works out for all of us reaching out to all of our friends and neighbors. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't interested in participating in the solution. There are a lot of people who want to participate in the complaining, but they're not willing to participate in the solution. Trustee Cassandra Matz has done a phenomenal job of lobbying every single elected official that we could think of. But unfortunately, a lot of those elected officials only care about how do I get reelected. And because of the fact that the people who reelect them don't know that they're not supporting this initiative, that's why they're not doing anything. Can you give me an example of an address in Hinsdale property tax amount? Yes, I can, Cynthia. Go to Saving the Southland Facebook page, and we've posted dozens of them. We have them side by side with Park Forest properties. We also do businesses. So go to Saving the Southland Facebook page, and you can get dozens of examples that show you the difference in property tax liability. If we have enough people, what's the next step to get the state rep to get the state to pay more and get the flat tax? So when we get enough people, the next step is to present the state legislature with the legislation that we've already written. Thankfully, we already have a state senator who's willing to support it. The next step is we're going to work on a state representative. But what I tell everybody is the danger is trying to put the cart in front of the horse. Right now, we don't have enough people. So our next step is to get more people. I understand human nature is I want it right now. That's not how legislation works. This is the modern day civil rights movement for us poor people that have median household incomes of $58,000. Imagine if in 1930, at the beginning of the civil rights movement, if the people were saying, well, once we get enough people, what's our next step? When we had to mobilize, we had to get educated. We have to get the people. Until we've got 4,000, 40,000, 400,000 residents throughout the state showing up and educated, we're not going to win. So instead of us worrying about the next step, my ask is to help us get more people. Please help us get to 100. for the next workshop that we have on the first Wednesday of September, please help us hit 100. That's my ask. How will we know when we have enough people? When we get to over 100,000 residents in the state of Illinois who are educated. The population for the state of Illinois population is 12.58 million. There are over 7 million registered voters in the state of Illinois. So when we start talking about enough people, we're talking in the millions. We got our work cut out for us, but that's okay, because if we don't do this, we're just going to keep getting higher and higher property tax bills. So we get to choose which one it is that we get. My choice is to keep trying to get more people. All right. Many people posted on Nextdoor that they went to Markham Courthouse to get their tax bill reduced. Is this true or a leg pull? So there's some truth to it, but it's only for people who didn't reapply for their exemptions. So a lot of seniors did not realize that they needed to reapply for their senior freeze exemption. And that's because for the last 2 years, it was automatically renewed. So for those seniors who forgot to apply for their senior citizens freeze, they were able to go and apply for their senior freeze at the Markham Courthouse, and their tax bill was deducted. If they missed out on a senior exemption, they were able to go to Markham Courthouse and get their tax bill reduced. But for those of us who only qualify for the homeowner's exemption or the senior and the homeowner, but we got it already, no, they were not able to go to Markham Courthouse and get their tax bill reduced because they had all of their exemptions. One of the things that is the problem that we're running into is the fact that we're just not educated about property taxes enough. And that's why we're in this predicament, because we don't understand what's going on. And people running to Markham and then getting their tax bill reduced because they missed out on exemption causes for some people to say, oh, well, all we need to do is go to Markham and then duplicate that versus trying to solve the root cause. Why was this not a problem prior if the state of Illinois never paid over 24% for our education? So respectfully, this has always been a problem. I learned about this topic when I was an intern with the Metropolitan Planning Council back in 2006. There was a group called A+ Illinois that was working with State Senator Meeks about trying to solve this. It's just a case where you may not have known it was a problem, but it's always been a problem. It's just that now, because property values have increased everywhere, including in poor communities, now it's manifesting itself more. It's always been a problem. Since I was a kindergartner at Arcadia School, District 162, we didn't have. So to give everyone a quick real life story of how it's a problem. So I had a speech impediment. I still have a speech impediment. I cannot pronounce my R's properly. And for somebody named Mario Reed, that was a major problem because I would say Mario Weed. Well, because we had a speech pathologist in the schools that would only come on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I was able to go to speech therapy on those days. But because the funding was reduced, the very next year after I left from Arcadia, my younger sibling wasn't able to get that same speech therapy, and now their impediment is far more pronounced than mine is. That's back in the 80s. This has always been a problem. It's just the case where not everybody was aware of it, and now thankfully it is. What recently changed to cause this huge increase to happen? The pandemic is what caused what seemingly was a huge increase. Normally, we would have gotten reassessed in 2020, and you would have seen a gradual step. You would have went from a $4,000 tax bill to a $6,000 tax bill, and then from a $6,000 tax bill to an $8,000 tax bill in 2023. But because we did not get reassessed during the pandemic, that's what caused it to go from 4,000 2017's tax bill to 8,000 2023's tax bill. So it's simply a case where instead of it being a gradual increase that we all just got used to, because we skipped the reassessment cycle, it now made it more of a shock. But this has always been going on. We've always had this problem. Unfortunately, people just weren't educated, and they still aren't. And that's why these workshops are what it is that we're doing. In order to get more people from the South suburbs, I think we need to work for a strategy to reduce this outrageous assessment increase. We need to work for action to reduce across the board. We need to be solidarity with the people who live here. Many of us will need to move, including us. We can't afford an additional 1,000. I'm with you. And trust me, Trustee Matz and I have been working for this for 5.5 years. We've been in solidarity for that time period. We invite anyone and everyone else to help us get more people. What that doesn't mean is telling us what you think that we should do and then expecting us to execute on it. We've been working on this for 5.5 years. We're going to keep on working on this. If you want to help us bring more people, we encourage and welcome and thank you for it. But we are not here to do someone else's bidding. Trustee Matz and myself, we don't get paid for this. I've been doing this for 5.5 years. I haven't got a dollar. I actually lose money. I've paid for advertising. I lose time with my family. I've given up over 10,000 hours of my life to this cause. So trust me, I'm committed. My ask is that we get others to do so. Please help us. Join us in Matson at Victory Apostolic next week. Help us, help us, help us. I'm begging you. I'll get down on my knees and I'll beg. We want to fix this for everybody, but we need people. Understand that the new assessment is correct for decision makers who want to get rid of us, and for people who can afford it, they're hoping to benefit. That's not true. That is not true. This is not a case where there's some giant living in the hills who's pulling the strings. We have to let go of that mentality. This is simply, the system was designed to benefit wealthy people. It was designed back in the 70s when our public school funding formula was created. Those people are probably dead. So the people who created this system are not still here trying to get rid of us in 2024. It's just that if you were rich and you could design a system, you would design that system to benefit you. And that's what happened. It's up to us to say, we're not rich and we want to change the system to follow what the Constitution says. That requires people needing to show up and participate in the democratic process. They got to get educated and they got to mobilize. Even if it were a gradual increase, we would not be able to afford the current rate. You're 100% right. I agree with you. We haven't been able to afford the rate. That's why we have to get educated and mobilize. We know the problem. State's not paying its fair share, but we don't have enough people who say that this system sucks and we want to change it. That's what our work is. Our work is to get more people, and that's on us. All right. So thank you to everybody who's posting the comments and the questions. We want for these meetings to be interactive. We want to make sure to give you the information that you're looking for. Just as a reminder, you can go to Facebook and type in the page Saving the Southland. We post lots of information there. We post about the property tax rates. We post maps that show the rates based on the municipalities. We post the collection rates that we looked at today. We post about the lottery and how that's not enough money. We post the state budget so you can see what the total state budget is for education. All that information is there. All that information has the references so you can go and check it yourself. Don't believe anything I say. Go look at it for yourself. I invite and encourage everyone, do the research. The same way I did, you can. My goal is to make it so you don't have to spend as much time looking because I already went and looked. That's the goal, is to give you what's out there. Join us next Wednesday, August 28th at Victory Apostolic Church. Please invite your friends, your neighbors, your co-workers, all those mayors. For the person who said, have we reached out to the mayors? Call your mayor and invite your mayor to show up. And then that way you'll know that we reached out to your mayor. So that way, if they hear a call from you, hopefully it'll mean more than if I just start cold calling mayors and I don't live in any of their communities. Please help us get the people to show up. Additionally, the playback of this call is going to be posted on YouTube. Save the Southland. As a reminder, this is not just for the Southland, but the Southland is disproportionately impacted because we have more poor communities in our region than anywhere else throughout the state. And it's because of the way that the suburbs are outlined. And there's reasons for that, but I'm not going to go into that because it doesn't matter. All right. So what happened to the lottery money that was supposed to be used for schools? Thank you for that question. Really quickly, I'll show that. So the lottery money just isn't enough. It was never intended to be enough. If you go to Saving the Southland, I've done several posts about this, and I want for everybody to see what it says. So what about the lottery funds? The Illinois lottery generated $882 million. The public school education budget is $23.513 billion. $882 million is a drop in the bucket. That's the reason why the lottery was never going to solve the shortfall that existed. But because people aren't educated on the actual facts related to our education funding formula, when Blagojevich was selling that dream, it was easy to pull the wool over people's eyes because they didn't know that 882 million wasn't going to do anything for the shortfall that we have in our education funding budget. This is why education is so important, because elected officials can tell us anything when we don't know the real details about our situation. We have to get educated and mobilized. So the lottery money was never going to fix our issue. All right. So thank you. So I wouldn't say I'm a messenger from God, but I am somebody who is just tired of our situation, and I want to do something. I don't want to just keep complaining. I don't want to just keep going to my neighbors and saying, oh, I'm going to have to move to Indiana. I don't want to leave. I want to stay in my hometown. I want to live around people who have a similar cultural experience to me. I want to continue to go to the restaurants that I love. I want to be able to drive past my neighbor's house. I want to be here, but I don't want to pay taxes that are 4 times as much as what wealthy Hinsdalians are paying and get a lesser educational experience for my daughter. I had to pay for 8 years of private school education for my daughter to go to Calvary Academy while I was still paying property taxes for the public schools. I double paid. That's not fair. Nobody else should have to go through that. And that's what my goal is. How can we get the word out that we are trying to include the people who can't afford this? I totally respect the time and dedication you are putting into this. So now it sounds like we are on the same page. I do not want to tell you what to do. I want to work with all the good people we can find. The long-term goal of a state pot for income tax. So how it is that we can get the word out is we just got to go get the word out. The last meeting, I asked for everybody to go and knock on 10 doors. If you went and knocked on 10 doors, please raise your digital hand and let's see the people who actually did it. But how we get the word out is that we actually go get the word out. I know in today's technological, perfect. Thank you, Illinois. Thank you to the Motorola. We need everybody to be able to raise their hand and say, I went and I knocked on 10 doors and I asked my neighbors to join the initiative. And we have to do it week after week, month after month. This is a marathon. And while I know lots of people don't like running marathons, our alternatives are we get taxed out of our homes. So we can decide either we're going to go do the work and get the word out by talking to people, or we're going to lose our homes or have to move. My preference is keep doing the work, and I'm going to keep on showing up. Every first and third Wednesday, you're going to see me until I can't be here anymore. And then even thereafter, I hope my daughter will pick up the mantle, and I hope everybody else will continue to move this forward. This is not a case where it's Mario and Trustee Matz, and we're doing this for our benefit. We're doing this for the benefit of every poor community throughout the state of Illinois, because every last one of us are right now losing. We're paying a higher percentage in property taxes and getting a lower quality product of education for our children. We're getting hit twice, and it's not fair. And it's up to us to say we refuse to continue to accept it. We are going to do everything we can to mobilize our fellow neighbors. So we have to go get the word out by taking the word to the people. Each of us has to commit to getting 10 people to show up to the next meeting. And then after that, everybody get 10 more people to show up. We have to own this, and that's what we're doing. Are these chat messages going to be available on Facebook or anywhere else? So you can absolutely. Right now, the page of Facebook is Saving the Southland. You're welcome to do it. In terms of chat groups, I don't know if you mean like these conversations, but it's posted on YouTube, so anybody can go and get it there. You can share it from YouTube to Facebook. So however it is that you want to kind of get it out there, you can. All right, as a last reminder, again, so that everyone's aware, we have an in-person workshop at Victory Apostolic next Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. Please, let's pack that house out. We have invited state reps and state senators. So for everybody who says, how can we get their attention? This is how we can get their attention. If we have 10,000 people show up to Victory Apostolic and there's standing room only, that's going to get the attention of every state rep and every state senator anywhere close to Victory Apostolic Church. It's on us. We have to get the word out. We have to make this a priority for every person who will benefit and every person who is struggling with this dilemma. That's next Wednesday. The call is going to be posted on YouTube, Save the Southland, and then we're going to have another in-person call Wednesday, September 11th. We'll have the Zoom call online for the first Wednesday of September, which should be September 4th. Any other questions? Any other questions? And again, thank you to everybody who did show up. I want to really drive home the fact that we're delighted that we've averaged 45 people for the last 3 calls. This is the first time in 5.5 years that we've averaged 45 people for 3 consecutive calls. So it's working. We got to keep the momentum. We can't let it subside. We have to keep the momentum. Let's form a committee of people producing strategies to create a campaign about this. We can get the word out, and it will have much more effect if we organize with all the creative means we have available. We need a committee, a think tank, and foot soldiers. So, Bob, I'm with it. Feel free. Organize the committee. I volunteer myself to be responsible for facilitating the calls and making sure that any questions that anybody has, I'm happy to provide. So you have my commitment for that. I'm also willing to contribute financially as well. So I'm happy to pay for if we need printing, if we need flyers, I'm happy to do that. Will there be a formation of a core group at the Victory events? So we can talk about that. Yes, 45, let's get more. Yes, we can do it. Yes, I agree. We absolutely can do it. All of our communities have thousands of people. Even Fort Heights has 2,500 residents. So if we just get 10% of all of the South suburbs, we're talking about having over 50,000 people right there. Let's just shoot for 10% of residents. We're shooting for a 10% flat tax rate. Let's shoot for 10% people to commit to come and participate in the movement. Thank you to each and everybody who showed up. Have a great evening. Hopefully we'll see some of you next Wednesday, and we'll see even more of you on the call. Please, please, please get the word out. Go knock on doors. Have a great one all, and take care. Thank you.